Posting is permanent. This simple guideline for the internet has been ingrained in the minds of every person who has a connection to it, and the simple and easy access to the collection of humanity's impact on the earth is something that we often overlook. From food delivery to random family videos of people you will never meet, to a random song your friend once sent you on a Friday night in junior high, to the forgotten message boards still imbued with the emotions, thoughts, and opinions of the people from behind black mirrors who typed them long ago. This access to anything and everything, no matter how useful or obscene, at a moment's notice is in part why I think the topic of today's video is so popular to many people. Because in a time where anybody can see anything, the most intriguing subject is that which hasn't been seen for a very long time and may never be seen again. Lost media for many years has been one of my favorite subjects here on YouTube, and now that I have a platform of my own, I'd love to share a list of lost and cancelled projects that go from household names to some that are more obscure and have only ever been known by very few people. Cancelled projects from a medium that is much younger than most, and I'm sure, like many of you, holds a special place in my heart. Let's take a deep dive into a list of video games that were cast aside and forgotten. Until now. Welcome to the weird world of lost video games. Agartha. Agartha was a single-player survival horror game in development from 1998 to 2001, made for the Dreamcast Entertainment System. The game's protagonist was a man named Kirk as you discover and uncover the subterranean city of Agartha, where, quote, evil is being kept prisoner and is desperate to escape. In this game, you would have faced against cult members, monsters, demons, evil priests, archangels, soldier monks, and the Sentinel, who is described as the ultimate personification of evil. Reminiscent of games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, its mysterious and creepy atmosphere in the snowy Romanian countryside, I'm sure would have been well received if they were able to get it off the ground, especially with Frederick Reynal, the creator of the Alone in the Dark series and pioneer in the survival horror game genre, working as creative director. Sadly, the game was cancelled with Sega's decision to discontinue the production of the Dreamcast. Search efforts for anything pertaining to Agartha have come up with a full playable demo that was discovered on an eBay auction and was promptly dumped online in 2018, with a more advanced version being uploaded to the Internet Archive in 2021. Charlie Brown's All-Stars. The Peanuts was a daily American comic strip written and illustrated by Charles M. Schulz that went on from 1950 to 2000, that was later turned into an animated series that ran from 1983 to 1985. The Peanuts centered around a group of children, each with their own unique personalities and quirks, most famous of which is Charlie Brown, who's known for not being able to kick a football, fly a kite, or win a baseball game. Charlie Brown's All-Stars was a baseball game named after an animated special. The game would have had over 70 playable characters and 4 party games consisting of contests of batting, fielding, pitching, and Simon Says renamed to Lucy Says. The game was cancelled due to Farsight, the game's developer, stretching themselves too thin and getting involved with too many projects at once, leading to the company filing for bankruptcy. So far, no builds of the game have ever been released, and the only things that were found were an ad for the game, a 3D render of Charlie Brown's character model, and footage from the game's character select menu. Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers. Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers was a puzzle game for the Game Boy Advanced and GameCube systems. The game would have Donkey Kong drop coconuts filled with paint to make squares and rectangles onto the ground to earn points as cremlings appear occasionally to negatively affect the player's progress. In 2002, Microsoft bought Rare, the game's developer, and as a result, led to many of the games they were working on at the time being cancelled and or reworked. Coconut Crackers was later turned into Mr. Pants, which released in 2004, and unfortunately, no playable demos have ever been released. Cartoon Network Battle Crashers, Lost DS port. Using the characters from the most famous cartoons they had at the time, Cartoon Network put them into a crossover beat-em-up game that released in 2016 for the PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and the Nintendo 3DS. The only evidence for this apparent lost port of the game was box art found on the website of Game Mill Entertainment, the game's publisher. The reason for its cancellation is unknown, and nothing else on the port has come to light, but it's safe to say that the original DS was merely outdated, and making a port for it would have been financially unwise. Beavis and Butthead in Hollywood. Beavis and Butthead in Hollywood was a game designed for the PlayStation 1 from 1998 to 1999. The game was revealed during E3 in 1998 and was frequently advertised in gaming magazines like Electronic Gaming Monthly and Game Informer, as they both tried to guess the game's progress and its release date before any official anything was ever given. Electronic Gaming had it at 40%, and Game Informer giving a more generous number at 80% completion, with the true number falling closer towards the former coming in at 50%. Due to New Level Software Inc., one of the game's developers, not receiving payment for their work done on the project from the publisher, the game was cancelled, and to this day, there is still no new information about what really happened to this would-be classic. The Cartoon Works, Lost CBBC Flash Game. The CBBC is the Children's British Broadcasting Network. The network, like basically every kids network at the time, had a website where children could play games of their favorite cartoon characters and hopefully learn something new in the process. The game was created by Complete Control with the intention of creating an immersive experience that allowed players to interact with characters from their favorite TV shows. The game had a rank-up system with new players starting off as trainees at the Cartoon Works factory. At this factory, you would play mini-games to rank up and earn higher job titles, with the goal being to reach the title of boss of the factory. The Wayback Machine has archived parts of the CBBC website from when it was running and before its shut down in 2011, but unfortunately, it has the game as completely inaccessible. Crash and Spyro, Adventure World. So this one is pretty damn cool, as it makes the worlds of Spyro and Crash Bandicoot to make an adventure flash game using trading cards found on Nabisco products like Capri Suns and cookies. The 2000s was filled with stuff like this, but sadly I don't remember anything from this collab because I was only like 2 at the time. The promotion was on candystand.com and tied in their respective crossover games for the Game Boy Advance. The cards you could get from the snacks your mom bought you contained codes that unlocked new minigames on the website, with over 90 available cards to collect. The Flashpoint archive has recovered the main game and Crash minigames. However, the Spyro minigames are lost, along with over 70 cards that were never recorded online, leaving us with the exact number of cards, the designs of said cards, and the remaining minigames being completely lost. Epic Mickey 3. Epic Mickey is a video game franchise that stars Mickey Mouse in what's called the Wasteland, a place for all the forgotten Disney characters no one remembers to exist in, with the power of paint to solve puzzles and fight monsters as you try to save this world from the blot. There are 2 games in the Epic Mickey series, with the creator of both wanting to do a 3rd game to finish off the trilogy. However, in 2013, Disney shut down Junction Point Studios, canceling the sequel and all of the games that were in production at the time. The only thing we have from the production of Epic Mickey 3 is a few images of concept art showing that the game was already planned out and ready to go. The creator knew the story he wanted to tell. And sadly, we'll never know what that story fully looks like. Dead or Alive, Code Chronos. The Dead or Alive franchise saw immense success in the late 90s and early 2000s, and had many different installments across multiple platforms from arcade cabinets to the Xbox 360. With its unique characters, fighting system, and physics, DOA was loved by millions. Developed by Team Ninja and led by Itadaki Tomonobu, the franchise saw an unreleased installment named Dead or Alive, code Chronos, an apparent prequel to the series that followed the story of Kasumi and Ayane before the first Dead or Alive tournament, and Code Chronos was never officially announced besides being featured on several Japanese posters promoting the game. After a feud with Tecmo, the game's publisher, Tomonobu left the company altogether, and the game was cancelled and forgotten. Dragon King. Everybody knows Super Smash Bros. And its impact on the gaming industry. The series overall has sold millions of copies worldwide, spanning across decades and borders, being the biggest crossover in the history of gaming. But are you familiar with where it all started? Dragon King, the fighting game, or Kakuto Gemu Ryo in Japanese, has very little known about it, even with gameplay and screenshots being available online shared by Sakurai Masahiro, the series' director. We can say with some level of certainty that it was very similar to the final product, and the playable character in the prototype was thought to be used for what would later become Captain Falcon, which I can totally see as they share a clear resemblance. The game is still not available to the public, however, it's a real privilege to see the early and humble beginnings of what would later become everyone's favorite Nintendo fighter. Cabin in the Woods and Left 4 Dead 2 campaign. In 2011, a horror movie was released named The Cabin in the Woods. After a group of friends take a vacation to a remote cabin, they unknowingly become part of a sinister experiment orchestrated by a shadowy organization. As terrifying and bizarre events unfold, they realize their fate is controlled by external forces, leading to shocking revelations about the true purpose of their ordeal. So how does this tie in with one of the best zombie games ever made? According to Chet Velzek, the series writer for Left 4 Dead 2, both Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard approached Valve after playing their game and came up with an idea for DLC for it based on the movie, Goddard saying this in a Reddit AMA. The game was going to be amazing. You're going to be able to play both in the upstairs cabin in the woods world and the downstairs facility with all the monsters. Believe me, I hate all video games based on movies. They always suck. But porting Cabin in the Woods into Left 4 Dead felt like the right fit. It pains me that it didn't happen. The reason for its cancellation was due to MGM's bankruptcy announced in 2011, where the film would be shelved indefinitely until its sale to Lionsgate in 2012. Even though we didn't get cool DLC, we still got a few Easter eggs in the film with a tank, witch, boomer, and smoker being visible in the containment cube scene to always remind us of what could have been and to pay respects for a great game. Gorkamorka. Gorkamorka was a racing game based on a tabletop with the same name, set to release in the early 2000s for the Dreamcast and Windows. The Dreamcast version was a racing combat game where 1 or 2 players would be put on a team against 15 other racers for a total of 32 players. The objective of the game was to destroy other people's vehicles and to be the last orc standing, or driving. The Windows version was almost completely different, with players having to recruit their own army, build and customize their rides from parts found in the open world, and use these vehicles to fight with other players, and players from both platforms would have been able to play and race with each other. The Dreamcast version is completely lost, with the Windows version only being partially lost. The reasons for their cancellations are unknown, but we can assume that it was caused by the Dreamcast's declining sales. Guitar Hero 7 Lost Build. There are few games as prolific as Guitar Hero. The multi-billion-dollar video game franchise published by Activision was a gaming sensation with its cool guitar controllers, classic rock songs, and fun gameplay, and it was hard to miss in its prime. The games were loved by millions and is still played by people who, over the years, have in some regards mastered the game. No matter how popular a game gets, however, it will always to some extent fall into obscurity as people move on to the next best thing. After 6 mainline games, the 7th would be cancelled during production, with the only things we know about it being potential playable songs from Metallica, Semisonic, Marcy Playground, and how the controller would have looked like. After a 5-year hiatus, the series would receive a reboot with Guitar Hero Live. But we don't have to talk about that mess of a game here. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Based off of the book with the same name, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was a disturbing PC adventure game released in 1995, with the uncut version of the game still missing. The plot of the book takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where a supercomputer named Am has wiped out humanity, leaving 5 humans to torture endlessly for its own amusement. The uncut version of the game has multiple lost cutscenes of the horrific things that would have happened to the characters in the game that are so graphic I can't really mention them here. And I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not you want to learn more about the story. There is also a possible deleted subplot from the game between 2 male characters, and a PlayStation port of the game was planned but was ultimately cancelled due to the strange and complicated transition from point-and-click to controller. The reason for the cutscenes being removed were possibly due to developers wanting to avoid controversy with just how graphic they were. And if that's the case, then they must have been pretty bad. Jimmy Neutron, Gotta Blast, Rocket Race. The game was an online flash web game released in 2002 that was developed for the 3D Groove game engine. Nickelodeon merchandise and licensed food products had codes that kids could redeem to unlock parts in-game. Unlocked parts would be used to build rockets to race on 4 different courses with characters from the show. Besides TV ads and a few promotional instances, there isn't much known about the game. A build of the game titled the non-promo version has many of the functions found in the full release, like upgrading your rocket, locked, and unusable. Many have tried making contact with people from Gigawatt Studios, the game's developer, to see if they had a full build of the game. However, there hasn't been anything to show for it so far. And who knows if anyone still has anything about it. Shaq Fu 2. I think we can all agree that Shaq Fu was peak for fighting games, and no other fighting game comes close to how perfect it was. So when I found out that there was a cancelled sequel, I was furious. Okay, jokes aside, Shaq Fu 2 was a 2D fighting game that was being developed by Delphine Software International for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. The evidence for it is basically non-existent, as the game never made it past the concept phase. However, there is still art from what we can assume would have been playable cast or fightable enemies. P.I.G. P.I.G was going to be a 3D platformer adventure game that was in development by Team 17 for the PlayStation and PC in 1996, with a planned release for spring 1999. The main character was going to be a pig named George working as a private investigator, and the gameplay appeared to be similar to games like Banjo-Kazooie and Croc. The main case to crack had P.I.G finding and rescuing a litter of piglets that were kidnapped by a Dr. Gotham in the wacky, strange, and puzzle-filled Fun Dazzle Magic Land theme park, and the game was showcased at the European Computer Trade Show of 1998 in London. According to an interview with co-founder and CEO Debbie Bestwick, the reason for the game's cancellation was due to the huge success of Team 17's Worms in the late 90s. She said that the success made them lose sight of how to develop the other unreleased projects that they had lost a lot of money on. The amount of content, areas, minigames, and characters would have been pretty cool to see. However, it doesn't seem we'll ever get to, as there are no prototypes or other pieces of information known to exist. A Nightmare on Elm Street. In 1990, an action platformer based on the Wes Craven horror movie franchise would be released on the NES, developed by Rare and published by LJN, who apparently were known for making subpar licensed video games like Back to the Future, Alien 3, Jaws, and many more. The gameplay and the story are directly from the third film in the series named The Dream Warriors, with the game going through very noticeable changes from production to final release, as the pre-release screenshots show a completely different and far more ambitious video game. According to an ad in Nintendo Power, the original idea was to have the player control Freddy Krueger, with the objective being to try and kill the teens looking for your bones, compared to the final product where the roles are reversed. No official reason was ever given for the change. However, Nintendo has a very family-friendly image, and to risk ruining that by having a game where you play as a murderous ghost scrote that chases children around isn't worth the controversy. Monster Chronicle 2: Mysterious Mecha Empire. Released for feature phone services in Japan in November of 2009, Crystal Monsters was a monster collecting role-playing game in which the player controls Yaota, the protagonist, through his adventure to become the greatest monster breeder in the land. Unlike many other games on this list, we actually know quite a bit about the plot, its characters, and monsters, and other features like real-time online battles between players. The game was available to play for 315 yen per month, which is 10 cents over $2 USD. The game is currently unavailable to download, and the game's official website is closed as well. Neither the game nor any footage has surfaced online, and most of the information about the game is from ads and promos. However, 2 tracks from the game's OST still exist online and are available on the composer's SoundCloud at Kevin Lee. Silent Hill: Cold Heart. This new Silent Hill game was slated to be released for the Nintendo Wii in 2007, developed by Climax and published by Konami. The game's story was centered around a college student named Jessica Chambers struggling with nightmares and insomnia. Shortly after speaking with a psychiatrist, she decided to visit her parents who live in another town. On her way to her childhood home, she loses her sense of direction and gets caught in a blizzard, leading her to the town of Silent Hill. The game was very ambitious, attempting to make complex, in-depth psychological profiles built from the player's experiences that would influence events later in the game. Connecting your Wii to a Wi-Fi connection that would influence weather and news for an added dramatic effect and improved immersion during gameplay. A booklet was leaked detailing an in-depth walkthrough of the game's first level, and a few aspects of the game were borrowed from the rejected pitch and put into Silent Hill: Shattered Memories. Plants vs. Zombies. Plants vs. Zombies is an extremely popular tower defense game released in 2009 that has multiple titles spanning multiple platforms and genres with millions of sales under its umbrella. The lost prototypes were of course created by the game's creator, George Fan, with some of them being available to the public shortly after they were made. However, since then, 3 out of the 6 builds known to exist have been lost and unavailable. The early builds show early designs for many of the plants and zombies that never made it into the final game, and how different systems of the game would have functioned, like the lawnmower mechanic. Some of my favorites were the dog walker zombie and the unused stinger plant that was later turned into the cactus. George Fan even released concept art of the alien enemies that would later be replaced by the zombies. As a fan of the series, it's really weird seeing how many changes and work was put into the game from moment of conception to being released as the game we all know and love today. Sam and Max plunge through space. Sam and Max are a duo of an anthropomorphic dog and sociopathic rabbit who are freelance police that started as a comic book series from the late 80s that would later become a TV series and after spread into video games. Infinite Machine, a small company consisting of former LucasArts employees, went bankrupt in 2002 that led to the game's cancellation. Many elements of the game's story, art, and world of this action-adventure were already put in place with more of an emphasis on the adventure aspects with the pacing of a 3D platformer. Here's what the game would have looked like in the words of the lead developer, Steve Purcell. It was actually based on the story I had written years before called Sam and Max Plunge Through Space. Sam and Max have to recover the stolen Statue of Liberty, which they find parked in another galaxy and being used as a casino called Green Mama's. Then they are pulled into an interplanetary intrigue with an evil despot and a mysterious hidden world where everyone resembles Max. We are breaking it down into an action, exploration, adventure game, and I was pleased where it was going. You would have controlled Sam directly, moving around environments about the size of an FPS level, solving item-based puzzles, and getting into dialogue exchanges. We were hoping to have a platformer without shallow characters or annoying jumping puzzles, and an adventure game without the feeling that nothing happens when you get stuck. The best part of having a pitch go unpublished is that I can say that we solved every problem and it would have worked perfectly, if only it had gotten made. Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann Chozetsu Hakkutsu Online. Chozetsu Hakkutsu Online, or Superior Excavation Online, was a licensed MMO game based off of one of the best mecha animes ever made, Gurren Lagann. The game would have the player as a digger in an underground village that drills for treasures in the first person, similar to what Simone does in the first episode of the anime. Trading in treasures gave you in-game upgrades and new drills at a shop run by a character unique to the game named Asaki. The game also had digital trading cards of characters, scenes from the show, and exclusive never-before-seen art that players could trade with one another. On April 6, 2007, Konami would hold an open beta that would be shut down a week later after finding out that their game was killing people's PCs. After downloading the game, a glitch would trigger an error code, causing players' Windows to crash indefinitely, leading to Konami mailing out replacement 500GB hard drives to the players affected so they could back up their files while reinstalling their operating systems. As you could imagine, this Bethesda-level f***up left a sour taste in people's mouths, and Konami shelved the game in hopes of sweeping this mistake under the rug, resulting in the game never being fully released and never seeing the light of day again. Meet or Die, lost mobile game. The web series Meet or Die was created in 2009 by Japanese animation studio Bonus Company. The series follows Yans and Gans, who are two dinosaurs trying to get meat in New York City, with them failing at it every time. The game was a 2D side-scroller as opposed to the 3D animation of the series, and the player would have been able to play as either Yans or Gans as they successfully kill innocent creatures for their meat. The game had 3 stages: a desert level, a forest level, and a city level, with spiked traps on the ground and enemies like pigs, birds, moles, and porcupines walking around with a mini-boss at the end of the levels. After completing them, the game would show your place on an online leaderboard to see who gained the most points. The only media release for the game would be a trailer on the official Meet or Die YouTube channel on August 23, 2011, without a single mention anywhere else on the internet, not even on the official Meet or Die website. 64 Wars. In 1999, Nintendo was building a turn-based strategy game codenamed 64 Wars, also known as Advance Wars 64. The game was first showcased at Space World 1999 with a planned release date of January 29th the same year. That unfortunately never came to pass. The Wars franchise was a tactical role-playing game with combat elements that would have the player start out with a map of the area they would battle in to plant troops and other useful equipment, and once this phase was done, the game would change into a 3D view of the battle. Since the game's announcement almost 3 decades ago, the game has never been acknowledged by Nintendo, and no builds of the game have ever been released or leaked. GamerGirl. GamerGirl was a mystery and suspense game written and directed by Alan Penderleith that uses full-motion video techniques in place of traditional game mechanics for an interactive and unique experience that was more like a playable movie than a video game. The game's outcomes would be dependent on the choices the player made throughout their playthrough, with multiple available endings. In the game, you take the role of a mod in the chat of a streamer girl named Abby Cake, after a short hiatus due to the sudden and strange disappearance of her friend Becky. After it was announced, the game received countless hateful and nasty comments, leading to the game's promotional material being quietly removed from the game's official page and anywhere the game was mentioned. Ironically, the game was made in part to spread awareness of the toxicity of the internet and the mental health of streamers, which I to some degree contributed to, as I remember when ads for the game were being played before YouTube videos. Now, I never posted a comment anywhere, and for the most part I just ignored it because it didn't seem like a game I would play, but I definitely was hating in spirit. There are no playable versions of any kind, and it is unknown if the devs even have it themselves. Big Bile Town. Big Bile Town was a game like many at the time. It was an MMO published by Third Day Games and was launched on November 15th, 2010. This game was very similar to games like Club Penguin, Pop Tropica, and Toontown, centered around the Bible and biblical values and lessons from scripture. The game's setting was around the 1st century, where the player would build a church-centric town with tokens collected by playing adventures. The tokens were also used to buy costumes, other buildings, pets, and other things like decorations to make their towns stand out and be unique to them. The game was the 3rd entry in a series of games also centered around the Bible and had plans of being released on mobile devices like iOS and Android. However, these plans fell through, with reasons for this never being given. The reasons for the game and its website shutdown are also unknown. However, there is still gameplay of it and interviews with children who played the game on the official Big Bile Town YouTube channel. CatDog. I personally never saw the appeal of CatDog because I always thought it was weird, and the logistical nightmare of how they go to the bathroom still haunts me. However, the show was quite successful, and successful enough to warrant its own video game. The game was going to be for the PlayStation and PC, developed by Nowhere, published by Hasbro Interactive. And after that, not much is truly known about the game's plot, gameplay, or other elements. The majority of the game's evidence comes from a page on the Blockbuster website and shows that the game seemed well along into production. The game's cancellation was likely due to Hasbro Interactive being sold to the French company Infogrames in 2001. The game's full official title was CatDog: Saving Mean Bob. City of the Dead. City of the Dead, also known as George Romero's City of the Dead or The Living Dead, City of the Dead was a first-person shooter for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC in 2006. In the fictional island of Ningun Futuro, a series of secret tests on cadavers go terribly wrong, leading to a zombie outbreak. It was the first game planned in a series of sequels based on the Dawn of the Dead franchise, although of course with a different name because of copyright. Due to Hip Interactive's tight budget and subsequent lack of funding, the game was cancelled, and shortly after the cancelling of the game, the studio shut down for the same reasons. No playable version was ever given, and the only time the game was shown was from a trailer at E3 in 2005. Doom 4. A sequel in the long-running franchise that started in 1993, Doom 4 was going to be played on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. The game was jokingly called Call of Doom, due to its resemblance to games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, and before the game's announcement, the plot and screenshots of the game were leaked. After an invasion of Hell on Earth due to the UAC playing with Ouija boards, demons start to wreak havoc on New York City, in the future year of 2038. The game's status was thought to be around the alpha stage and is thought to have a playable version. Maps, models, and modes for the project were all made, and it's sad to see that a game with a well thought out plot and cool gameplay will never be played. A few developers are still known to have the latest build of the game, and if you want to read more about the plot, check out the Lost Media Wiki. Doctor Who. Since 1963, the BBC original Doctor Who has been airing and has been one of the most influential and popular sci-fi shows in history. The show follows an alien Time Lord who travels through time and space, encountering all kinds of people, aliens, and other creatures in their adventures, fighting evil and protecting the innocent. With the show's reboot in December of 2004, a video game was planned and being developed alongside its filming. The game would have starred Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor and Billie Piper as companion Rose Tyler. The reasons for the game's cancellation after only 6 months of development are unclear, and when Paul Callahan, one of the developers who worked on the project, was asked if he could shed light on it, he said, quote, "It's complicated. Ultimately, there have been no leaks on gameplay, concept art, and other assets from the game, leaving what was made lost to time." Dexter's Laboratory, Robot Rumble. Dexter's Laboratory Robot Rumble, also known as Extreme Robot Rumble, was a 3D brawler fighting game that was being developed by N-Space and published by BAM Entertainment. Planned to be released on a multitude of consoles, it had plenty of potential to be another well-received game in the series of others from Cartoon Network. Unfortunately, however, BAM filed for bankruptcy shortly after, causing the game's cancellation. It looks like it would have played similarly to the PS2 classic War of the Monsters. Other than screenshots and leaked concept art, there hasn't been anything to know about the game since its cancellation, and it's very unlikely there ever will be. Family Guy Online. Sometimes while researching things online, you fall down rabbit holes or merely stumble across things you'd never expect to actually exist or have existed, and Family Guy Online is definitely one of those. Family Guy Online was an MMORPG around the American adult animated sitcom Family Guy that ran from 2012 to 2013. The gameplay was straightforward enough, with players, after making their own unique characters, would take on missions given to them by the citizens of the city of Quahog, where they could unlock customization items for their characters and combat skills, with snippets of episodes from the show. Because of how recent this game was made and played, It has a decent amount of footage and info about it online. However, because of its short lifespan, the game has less than you think. Fox, after seeing that it wasn't making much if any money on the game, decided to shut it down, and the game has been lost and unplayable ever since.
Play with yourself or others. No! Giggity giggity. Giggity giggity.
Ghostblood. Ghostblood was a real-time isometric fantasy role-playing game developed and published by WRF Studios for Windows in 2003. Basically, nothing is known about its story, the characters in it, unique mechanics, etc. Another game lost in more ways than one. Whatever Ghostblood was, I'm sure it was great. Jurassic Park. Survival. This movie tie-in action horror third-person shooter was developed by Savage Entertainment and published by Konami and Vivendi Universal Games. The planned release date was for fall of 2001 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Windows. Survival was supposed to be one of many and was to be released during the time of the third movie, but was ultimately cancelled due to artistic and visionary differences between the developers and publishers. The game would have had stealth, shooting, survival horror, and action elements. It would have played similar to games like Tomb Raider and Dino Crisis. As a security officer, the player would try and escape the island of Isla Sorna while trying to save other officers and scientists, fighting off T-Rex, Velociraptor, Dilophosaurus, and Spinosaurus. The game had hiding, shooting, and puzzle solving with a semi-open world that would have been fun to see and play. However, yet again, unfortunately, we will never— wait. No way. What? Jammin. Jammin is a lost arcade cabinet game from 1985, made and published by Atari Games. The game was a single-player band simulator where the two guitar players of the virtual band would play something, having the player play along to the music. Kind of like a really old Band Hero. Anything else about the game is unknown, and there is little information on it besides an unreleased promo for the game coming from the YouTube channel Regola Gianci, uploaded to YouTube March 31st, 2017. The promo was discovered on a decades-old VHS tape from around the same time that was later transferred to digital. A preserved, outdated, and easily faulty and destructible home video is the only reason we know this game exists. Crazy how that works. VIDEOWAY. From 1990 to 2006, Quebec, Canada's telecommunications provider Videotron had a TV box that featured a variety of different channels and features like weather updates, lottery results, horoscopes, on-demand entertainment, and most importantly, video games to its approximately 400,000 customers worldwide, all of which are completely lost. 50 games were available in both English and correct French to VIDEOWAY subscribers, mostly consisting of original video games developed for the VIDEOWAY systems and also including timeless classics like Hubert and Burger Time. VIDEOWAY even had live game competitions for teenagers on a popular French show called Le Club de Branche, or the Trendy Club in English, which is sick as hell, and I'd love to hear and learn more about how these games were played, though I most likely never will. Velvet Dark. Perfect Dark's cancelled sequel, Velvet Dark, was planned for the N64 and was in development for 1 year, from 1999 to 2002. In this sequel, the player would take control of Velvet Dark, the sister of the first game's protagonist, Joanna Dark. The game was going to be a third-person shooter, changing it from the first game's first-person view. No official reason was ever given to why the game was cancelled, however, it seems to have been shelved in favor of making Perfect Dark Zero. The only things left of the game are a render of Velvet's character model, and design document that goes more in detail about gameplay, plot, and technical possibilities the game was attempting to achieve. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Decide Your Own Destiny. These choose-your-own-adventure books, based off of the popular Disney Channel show, contain links to minigames that the reader would have to complete while reading through their story. The links to these games are now completely unusable. In these books, the reader was given 2 different options to choose from, giving them their own unique path, which made for an incredibly fun and awesome experience. The website where readers would go to watch animated scenes from the show or play through minigames has been shut down. The website, however, has been saved on the Wayback Machine, just without the 5 missing activities. James Pond, Jurassic Carp. This cancelled 3D platformer was planned for the PlayStation 2. James Bond Underwater Agent was a series of games that started in the 90s, and Jurassic Carp was supposed to be a reboot or reimagining of the character as a 3D platformer. According to reports, the game's development was going smoothly. However, Creature Labs, the game's developer, went bankrupt before the game was to be released. There is a completed demo of the game made to show potential publishers, and it's in the possession of a former developer who is unable to release it due to rights of the character being owned by GameWare Europe. They did, however, take screenshots of the game, and all I can say is I'm sad it was never completed, and I really want to play it. And hopefully we'll get to soon. Mario Demo. The Virtual Boy was a video game headset developed and manufactured by Nintendo, released in 1995. That was discontinued only a year later due to its lack in sales and interest from the general public. The Virtual Boy used what's called the parallax effect to simulate depth on the famous red monochrome games playable on the console. Before its release and subsequent failure, Nintendo created a tech demo to show off its 3D effects at Shoshinkai 1994, featuring a rendered image of Mario Jumpman Mario, with the letters of the Virtual Boy logo moving towards the viewer, one letter at a time. This demo has never been seen since. Hey guys, it's Alexi. Thanks for watching the video. Please let me know what game surprised you the most, or which game you would want to play the most. I personally really liked the James Bond game and the Sam & Max in space. I sometimes play games on my gaming channel or stream right here, so if you want to see me more often, check me out over there. And if you haven't seen them already, check out my other essays about video games I love. Make sure to like, sub, hit that bell, and say hi to the wife and kids for me, alright? God bless, and good night.
Thank you.